Hello and welcome to a new series. Our parish churches are a national treasure, and yet they've become rather marginal, in some cases even redundant. For the inhabitants of a medieval parish, their church was at the centre of life, not only religious life but also social life. It was where people met. It was a symbol of local pride, a place of communal collective memory, where they paid their tithes, where fairs and church ales were held, where the plough was blessed and the harvest celebrated. Playing a fundamental role in the rites of passage, the milestones of life for countless generations of ordinary people. Life within the community began at the font. The church was where they married and where much business was conducted, and where vigils were held for the departed. And yet there's little record of how the medieval congregation interacted with the church at a physical level. Parish registers only begin in the 16th century. The evidence that survives from the medieval period relates to the parish elite. The brasses and the effigies that we find in our parish churches are not the peasants. They're the rich merchants, the local lords of the manor, sometimes in their armour, often with their wives in their finery. So where is the voice of those who worked the land, who wove the cloth, who baked the bread, who also worshipped in these places? One of the areas where we may hear a distant echo of their voices is in graffiti. Images and occasionally texts inscribed into the fabric of the building, and it's far more common than was once thought. Recent studies have uncovered a wealth of examples, and it had been a neglected source, but recently much more interest has brought it to the forefront. And it can be an important source of information, tells us about social history, about attitudes and about feelings. Interpretation, of course, is all, and it's open to debate. The recent survey at Canterbury Cathedral revealed a wealth of graffiti in the crypt where Thomas Becket's original shrine is located. Mostly it's religious. There are biblical scenes, there's a Christ in majesty, there are crosses and Alpha and Omega symbols. And it's been interpreted there as votive, a kind of offering by the pilgrims visiting and leaving a record of their presence. You find most graffiti where the local stone is relatively soft, like clunch, a type of chalky limestone that's common in eastern England. Less graffiti where the local stone is something like granite. And it can be hard to see without an angled raking light, even in prominent places. Many items of graffiti were covered later in whitewash, others have worn with age or been obliterated by restoration. Can graffiti be art? Well, I think Banksy and his supporters would make a case. Or is it profanity? Is it an expression of vandalism? Well, when it was cut, it would have been into brightly painted walls. The lower parts of church walls were unsuitable for decoration beyond a single colour. But as such, if cut through, it would have been very noticeable, which suggests that it was at least tolerated and probably accepted. The place to look for graffiti is at eye level and lower, and the hot spots are doorways, tower arches and aisle piers. You have to separate graffiti from mason's marks. They were commonly cut to identify the work of individual stonemasons involved in the original building of the church and most probably on piecework. They tend to be small, simple, cleanly made and of even depth, but they're very easy to confuse with interlocking V and W graffiti, sometimes inverted to create a pentangle, and that is widespread and thought to be apotropaic, symbols to ward off evil, which suggests that alongside Christianity some earlier pagan superstitions persisted. Daisy wheels belong in the same category. Simple images such as crosses and circles are most common. These interlocking circles on the south side of the chancel arch at St Nicholas, Compton in Surrey, where there is also an image of a knight. At St Margaret's Church, St Margaret-at-Cliffe in Kent, which is only about 4 miles from Dover, there's an accurate depiction of a medieval galleon on a pier. This was discovered when the whitewash was removed from the piers in the 19th century. This ship graffiti is at St Mary's Church, Parham in West Sussex. And there are several ships that have been cut into the walls at St Nicholas's, Blakeney in Norfolk. Some quite crude, but they still provide us with information about the design of hulls and rigging and sails. And although there is graffiti all around the church at Blakeney, all the ships are on the south arcade, where there would have been a side altar before the Reformation. The designs of the ships suggest that they were carved over at least a couple of centuries, and none of them overlap. Whoever cut each of these was respecting the earlier work. And Norfolk Medieval Graffiti Project, who've been cataloguing and noting these, they suggest they were devotional, that they are prayers in stone, perhaps for a safe voyage to come, or thanks for a safe return. And you might expect to find ships carved in churches on the coast, but you also find them far inland, more common on the coast, but you find them throughout the country. At St Mary's Church at Ashwell in Hertfordshire has graffiti showing a pre-Great Fire of London St Paul's Cathedral, and there's also a wonderful inscription telling of a plague which hit the village between the years 1350 and 1361. It's in abbreviated Latin, but this is how it translates. There was a plague. 1000, 3 times 100, 5 times 10. 1350. A pitiable, fierce and violent plague. A wretched populace survives to witness, and in the end a mighty wind, Morus, thunders in this year in the world, 1361. On a lighter and more modern note, couples who got married at the Church of St Peter ad Vincula, Church Laneham in Nottinghamshire, in the early 19th century, traditionally gave either 5 shillings or a sage cheese to the bell ringers in order to have their initials carved inside a painted cheese or wedding ring in the bell tower walls, perhaps as a memento or possibly for good luck. The date range of these is from 1813 to 1840, when the tradition seems to have vanished. Now, next time, a more traditional art, wall paintings. If you've enjoyed this video, hit the like and subscribe buttons and click on the notification bell to be informed when the next video is available, or you can subscribe by clicking on the rose window over my shoulder.